Right, so today I want to talk about this story out of the Financial Post. Now, it's titled Half of Canadians Say They're on the Brink of Insolvency as Coronavirus Threatens to Burst Country's Consumer Debt Bubble. Now, I'm going to read a little bit about it, then I'll get into it a little bit more. So let's get into it here. The coronavirus crisis is delivering an unprecedented financial shock to Canadians at a time when their personal finances were already fragile, says insolvency accounting firm MNP. The MNP Consumer Debt Increase released Monday found that about half of Canadians, 49%, surveyed now are on the brink of insolvency, saying they are $200 or less away from not being able to meet their debt obligations each month. A quarter of these said they were already unable. That is crazy. That is crazy to think about. But anyway, our records underscore how vulnerable Canadian households are to income interruption. Over the next few months, we'll likely see an unfolding of two crises: the global pandemic and the bursting of the Canadian consumer debt bubble. Um, I'm not going to read too much more because, again, I don't want to read too much. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit about this because this is very important for a lot of reasons. But the main thing being that I wanted to point out is that this wasn't a secret. This wasn't a secret. This wasn't unpredictable. Someone like me is just a guy. I mean, I'm a lot more knowledgeable than the average person. But I mean, I'm just a guy who reads articles, who watches YouTube videos. I mean, I do have a little bit of schooling in the economic field, but again, I by no means have a PhD in economics or I'm an economist or any of that kind of stuff. And I made several videos about this, how bad the Canadian economy was, and how we have to do something about it, and we didn't do anything about it. And the thing that really bothers me is that, again, we didn't do anything about it when people like me, who aren't by no means experts, there's no way that the federal government didn't know that this kind of stuff was coming. So again, the problem is that this whole situation is more than likely going to, I mean, it already is a recession. The recession's more than likely going to be the worst recession we've ever seen, and it could be a full-on economic collapse in that people lose their retirement. And again, the one thing I want to point out is that they're not going to lose their money, they're not going to lose their house. The government would never let that happen, because if that happened, again, society would collapse overnight. Um, what they'll do is that they'll basically just print money. The problem, I guess, basically in a nutshell, is that people's house, people's savings won't be worth as much as it was before. In other words, inflation will go up so much that real estate prices will drop, or at the very least, $500,000 is nowhere near what $500,000 used to be as far as purchasing power goes. So the problem isn't people are, a massive amount of people are going to get kicked out of their house or lose all their life savings. The problem is that their life savings aren't going to be worth anything anymore, or the problem, I guess, the more realistic thing will be it won't be worth nearly as much as it was worth. And that's the big problem with this kind of stuff. And that's the prediction too that I'll make, is that we're going to have a massive recession. Like, it'll make the Great Depression look like child's play. It'll make it look like, Mike Tyson fighting a 5-year-old girl. That's what it's going to look like. And it may be this, right here and now, or it may be 10, 20 years down the road, maybe 30. But it's going to happen in most people who are, anybody under, I'd say, 40 or 50. It's going to happen in their lifetime at some point. I would, again, mark my words, it will happen. And if it doesn't happen then the government did a really good job of pushing it off, or they finally got their head on straight. Again, the problem with this kind of stuff is that we can't afford our current lifestyle, and getting it through to people's heads that we can't afford to have our universal healthcare system and massive welfare state and all this kind of stuff. Again, my official position is that if we could afford it, yeah, I'd be all for it, but we can't afford it. Again, the province of Alberta spends about as much as they generate in tax revenue as they do on healthcare. So every dollar that's spent on something other than healthcare is either through basically oil revenue or debt. That's the only thing. And the problem is that debts aren't going down. Debts are only going up. The Trudeau government, is pumping, what, 20, 30 billion, I don't even know how much it is now, into the economy basically within a month. And that's going to be a massive amount of inflation. The carbon tax is coming in, that's even more inflation. And all the while, is the average person's wages going up? No, they really aren't. And that's the big problem now, is that our current way of life is not getting really any better. Yeah, technology is getting better, but wages aren't growing with that. Like if the median wage had grown with inflation since the 1960s, 70s, the median wage should be like 250,000 dollars a year right now, and it's not. It's what, like 50, 60 grand is median wage. Yeah, I know household income's more than that, but median wage isn't. And that's the problem. The problem isn't, oh, you have all these people on the left will immediately jump in and be like, oh, that's because the free market. Well, no, the free market is what generated the in the first place. You know, in the 1950s and 60s, you could buy a middle class house for like what, 2 years' wages. I heard of several people that have done that. And now, two years' wages, what is that? What is that going to? $100,000, 120, $130,000. That's not even going to get you a one-room apartment, unless you're in a small town somewhere. I mean, in Toronto, you got it. That's going to get you nothing. You'll be lucky to get a box on the side of the road in Toronto or Vancouver. And again, the problem is you have all these people that they blame the wrong thing. They think it's a lack of government regulation. It's more government regulation. Was there more or less government regulation in the 1950s and 60s as there is now? Well, of course there was less. Of course there was more of a free market. So again, the correlation is the exact opposite of what these people would have you think. And the problem with these people is they're so brainwashed. And again, those kind of people, all they care about is the here and now. They're people. I mean, I understand where they're coming from. They're most likely people living paycheck to paycheck, and they think that, oh, if there's a free market, well, what's going to happen if I lose my job? I mean, is the government going to bail me out? Well, no, but you'll be able to save more money. You'll be making more money. You'll be able to save more. You'll be able to buy insurance. You'll be able to work somewhere that'll give you insurance. All that stuff would be easily taken care of. Not only that, it would be cheaper. Again, healthcare was cheaper back in the day because, again, there wasn't massive amounts of government regulation. The other problem with our healthcare system is that the doctors are paid based on the amount of people they see. Or in other words, they're paid basically to keep people unhealthy. And we wonder why we're all so unhealthy. Again, the problem is that the system is so backwards, and the biggest problem is that the overwhelming majority of people support it. The overwhelming majority of people support it, and again, people on the right too. I don't want to make this as just a left-wing kind of hating video, but a lot of the people on the right support this, are perfectly on board with this kind of stuff too. They just want less taxes, basically. Um, but again, I wanted to make a video about this because the important thing is that it's not a secret. Like someone like me, I'd made multiple videos on how bad the economy was. And again, this is another thing to go to, that all these the Trudeau supporters out there that are talking about how great the economy is under Trudeau. Again, show them this, and if they don't admit they're wrong, again, I don't have words for you. Because if you had a good economy, people wouldn't be $200 away from not being able to pay their mortgage or pay the bills. That's the exact opposite of a good economy. An example of a good economy is people's wages are going up, people have savings, people can afford, holidays, all this kind of stuff. And another example of a bad economy is people have a lot of debt. Because if you have a good economy, well, you can pay off your debt. It's not a complicated topic. Again, the big problem is that people nowadays, so partisan, so set in their ways, so brainwashed. Again, there's no changing people's mind. This is irrefutable evidence that the Trudeau government has done a terrible job with the economy. Terrible job. And are you going to get people to admit, anybody who supported Justin Trudeau, who maybe even in the past, if maybe they didn't, are you going to get them to admit, hey, I was wrong about this one? No, never going to happen. I've never seen that. Never seen that. I've heard of people. I have heard of people, but again, it's so few and far between. That's the big gripe. That's the biggest problem with politics nowadays and all this kind of stuff, is that there's no changing people's mind. And again, like the only thing that's going to get people, the reason why I believe in the things I believe is that we can either have a soft landing or a hard landing. The problem, people's main excuse for going away from the free healthcare and the welfare and all this kind of stuff is they'll bring up, oh, well, people will suffer. Well, what they refuse to acknowledge is that a very big number of people is going to suffer if we don't address this now. We can have a little bit of suffering in the here and now. Yes, some people will suffer, or we can have a massive amount of people suffer. We can have everybody suffer because unless you're filthy rich, like I'm talking, top 1% of 1%, even people that are millionaires are going to suffer when the whole thing collapses because again, their houses are going to be worth not a whole lot. Their investments aren't going to be worth a whole lot. I mean, they're not going to be homeless, but they're going to suffer a lot too, and that's the problem too. Again, like I say, people aren't going to listen. I just want to have it out there that when things come down, at least I'll be able to have a little bit of credibility, and at least I'll be able to give people a little bit of forewarning to be like, hey, I called all this stuff. I knew it was going to happen. Again, I made multiple videos. And again, the coronavirus is not the cause of this. The coronavirus is just the thing that pricked the bubble. The bubble was getting so big that the slightest shock was going to prick it anyway. And that's what I said, that when you have an economy where half of people are that close to not being able to pay their bills, the slightest shock to the economy is going to cause a big recession. And again, the problem is that the government's solution to this kind of stuff is just more of the same. It's not more of the same. And it's never, hey, we were wrong about this. We admit it. We're going to change our ways. That never happens, and that's what should happen. But anyway, I've ranted enough as far as this topic goes. I wanted to make a video about it, to update people about it and to kind of try and educate people at least a little bit on it. But anyway, I'm gonna leave it there. I do have my PayPal and email address linked in the description. I appreciate any donations, but at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already.